Hello, everyone. It is Jennie and Laurie Farrington here today to talk about the Leo full moon, the beautiful Leo full moon in the middle of Aquarius season, which happens on February 12th, 2025 at 8:53 a.m. That's Eastern time, so adjust for where you are. So that's what we're here to talk about today. And I'm not going to go into a whole big intro. If you've been watching us, you've heard the intro 100 times, and all the information you need you can find below here, all the places you can find us, all the stuff. Other than that, please do subscribe to our channel and like us and share us and do all those good things. So, what do you know about this full moon, Jennie?
Oh, gracious. Well, it's a full moon. So, like every full moon, it means that it's the midpoint of the moon phase cycle. In a nutshell, that means that you've had your new moon, and like a seed that's being planted in the ground, and then that starts to open up. And by the time 2 weeks later you reach the full moon, it's kind of like you're looking at the flower of that seed you planted. So you really get to see like what have these past couple weeks been like. And then after that full moon moment, you're on the second half of the cycle in which you're beginning to let things go. So that's the really simple version of the moon cycle. And I guess if you're thinking about the plant cycle that I brought up, the second half of the cycle is the oats gone to fruit, and then the seeds get scattered, and then everything goes to compost and it starts again. So it's a really cool cycle, and it's really cool to think of it that way. But the full moon is always that place that everybody knows a full moon. Everybody, even if you don't really think much about the moon, when you go out and you see that big bright full moon, it gets your attention.
Mhm.
So it is a exciting and vibrant part of the moon cycle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the full moon is the opposition of the sun and the moon. That's why it shines so brightly because the full disk of the moon is in perfect alignment with the sun. So that's what we see. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. And there's something very special about this one, isn't there?
Yes. I almost like the Leo full moon. Well, let's just also point out that this is the full moon to the new moon that is on January 29th at 9 Aquarius. If you're looking at the bigger cycle, which you can use it in a full 6 month, year long cycle, that new moon was August 4th. So we had a Leo new moon. So that would be the starting point for this much longer cycle. So those are the two things. And by definition, the Leo moon is always going to be during Aquarius season. It's always going to be the dead opposite zodiac sign as whatever the sun's in. So we are in the thralls of Aquarius season, and then this Leo moon brings in this really lovely keynote of warmth and liveliness. So, Lori, what do you think about the polarity? What do you think about the difference between Aquarius and Leo?
It's one of my favorites for some reason. I
Totally.
love the polarity between Aquarius and Leo. You know, like you said when we were talking earlier, you said that one of the commonalities between Leo and Aquarius is friendliness. And I really loved that you said that. You know, the any polarity, it's like two sides of the same coin.
Mm-hmm.
They're very different, but they've got this common thread. And between Leo and Aquarius, yeah, the common thread is this friendliness. On the Aquarius side of the polarity, we've got this kind of objectivity. We're really cultivating a more humanitarian friendliness, friendliness for all people. On the Leo side, we're really getting into the warmth of what is personal.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really the difference between the two is the warmth of Leo and the cool objectivity of Aquarius.
Yeah. I mean, I think, we made our Aquarius season video and we talked about, objectivity, as Lori's saying here. And also, I always think about building alliances with
Mm.
Aquarius. It's this idea of having this vision and then, connecting like minded others. It is an air sign. So it's very concerned with that social engagement of, hey, let's swap ideas, let's communicate, let's bring people together over similar concepts. So it really has that broad vision. And then what Leo does is it brings in that lovely like personal engagement. So if you're trying to build a team or build an alliance, you need to draw in all these different people. So you're going to need to have a lot of different individualized personal conversations. And that's where the Leo comes in, where you have this warm, friendly, personal conversation with somebody, and you realize that you have these things in common and they want to join the group, and you keep building the group that way. And then everybody has their warm, friendly interactions with each other amongst themselves. So when you think about them in a polarity that way, this is really the message of how you build groups. This is what you do. You need both. You need the vision and you need the warm conversation that you can connect with people on an individual level. So,
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we want to just open up the chart? Are we ready?
Well, let me share a story.
Oh,
I
good. I
got
love stories.
my little story about this is just that I have this image in my head of what the Leo full moon is. And the image is, I remember a few years ago, I went out on a midnight ski on the Leo full moon with a group of friends. And it was a gorgeous night. It was clear, but it was cold. There was a river nearby, so all the mist was rising off the river. And there we were skiing along. I think there was about 8 or 9 of us, and it was just amazing. And we had moments of silence together. We're all just shushing along in the skis. And then these moments of connecting with individual people. And then you kind of switch order and you talk to someone else. And I just have that image. To me, that is the Leo full moon. It's this image of being in a group of friends. You have these wonderful connected moments on an individual level. And meanwhile, you're just in this beautiful scene. And it feels like the moon is there for you, which is a very Leo feeling. So I just want to share that little story because I love it. I always think of that at this full moon. So
I love that story because it really does show, the whole group, the Aquarius, you're all there as a group, and yet you've got those individual personal alliances and you can move in and out of them. That really is a perfect image for the Leo full moon. So from that, I would just encourage everybody, go for a midnight ski. Or,
yeah.
find an equivalent, find some sort of an equivalent for the Leo full moon, or, within a day or two around the Leo full moon, find a way to be in community with people that you can also connect on a level of warmth with.
Yeah.
It
No, I like the
really
way too. Yeah.
perfect.
Sorry, interrupted you there. Sorry about that, Lori. I was
That's
just
fine.
going to say that I like the way too that you really have to think about polarities. So in astrology, polarities technically they're oppositions. It's an opposition. That's the name of the aspect. But at the same time, they're not fully. They are complementary elements. They are not elements that have nothing in common. Fire and air have something in common. Fiery Leo and airy Aquarius. They are both yang signs. They're both concerned with outward expression. So they really come together. And I think the polarities really describe how to make things come together. I mean, there's other oppositions in, let's say, the herbal context that really are opposite and at odds with each other. For example, fire and earth are not as easily meshed, and fire and water is not as easily meshed, but fire and air work together. So I just want to encourage you with these polarities, just to think of it in that context. They have common ground. So you want to find that common ground and then work with both. So
Yeah. Yeah. Air feeds fire, right?
right.
Fire wouldn't burn without air.
Yes. Cool. All
Okay.
right.
So let's open up the chart and take a look at what we've got for this moment of the Leo full moon. Here it is. Here is the sun. Whoops. I don't want a crooked line. Good grief. We need a straight line. Here's the bright, shining sun in Aquarius and the beautiful Leo full moon.
Nice. Yeah. So, I mean, I think we've covered this topic pretty well, but in a nutshell, that Leo full moon is really highlighting a bright, warm, friendly spark that is very much part and parcel of the Aquarian season focus, the way that we connect with other people and build alliances while maintaining an objective point of view. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think
And
that's the first piece. Yeah.
when we look at this, and the thing that we always look for is what other characters in this grouping of planets, what other characters are really involved in the conversation between the sun and the moon? And what's really clear in this particular full moon is that Uranus is in a nearly perfect little square to both the sun and the moon.
Look at that.
Isn't that interesting? So, Uranus is the planet of change, sudden change, awakening. A square aspect creates tension and the need to take some sort of action.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I often think about Uranus. There's two sides to everything, right? And I think of Uranus as it can bring a great deal of anxiety. It can also bring a great deal of excitement. And oftentimes, when we feel one or the other of those, rising in our life, we can, if we work with it, if we learn how, we can kind of flip it. Anxiety comes along. You can work and find the excitement underneath that because there's always both involved.
Mm-hmm.
That's my idea anyway. So, in the midst of this moment of this full moon, there may be some anxiety. There may be some excitement. What are you going to do with it? It's asking for something.
Yeah. No, anytime you see this is a what's called a T square in astrology, and anytime you see a T square, the steering arm, which is in this case is Uranus and Taurus, is the thing. I like to call it the steering arm, but it's the thing that puts pressure on the opposition. And that can be managed in a couple different ways, just like Laurie's saying. I mean, in essence, it's sort of like the the Uranian square to this is saying, if you have anxiety, then be brave and reach out for that full moon moment, and be warm and friendly and think about those alliances and be willing to sort of release that anxiety by leaning into the opposition. On the other hand, you can, if you're excited, this is a moment to really share that excitement in that Leo full moon moment, which is essentially saying exactly the same thing, but there's just, you can work with it in different ways. It's like if you feel pressure, then reach for the valve that's going to let you release some of that, and whether that pressure is excitement or whether it's anxiety is not, doesn't matter as much, but it is about branching out and leaning into it essentially. I think that made sense.
I think that made sense. What else do you see in this chart that we should be thinking about?
Well, I mean, first of all, just quick mention, Mercury is right next to the sun. You will see it's a couple degrees after. That means we've just started a new Mercury cycle. So there's that. So that always is bringing in, oh, this is the beginning of a new conversation, essentially, is
Mm.
how you can think of that. Uh, I also think I can't help but look to the ruling planet of Aquarius, which I'm going to use the old ruler, which is Saturn. So Saturn is still in Pisces. So although this is a very sort of extroverted full moon, like be gregarious, be warm and friendly, there's an underlying context of the emotional bonds here. And Saturn, the ruler in Pisces, is also trying to Mars. That's a nice aspect for those two. So there's a lot of energy underneath. It's almost like there's this flowing energy of your emotional connections and bonds with other people. And that's part of what you want to bring out and celebrate at this full moon in a very extroverted type of way. So I
Mm.
like that kind of tucked away emotional, in water signs, emotional connection that is
Mm.
fueling some of this too. So, yeah. What do you think?
Well, I hesitate to go this next step, but I can't help it. It's just, when you bring up that Saturn rules the sun, then I want to immediately look at, okay, so Saturn in Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is in Gemini.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like really bringing the conversation to the table as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that I like the layering, like, yeah, having that Jupiter and Gemini, the yang sign, then you've got this layer of Pisces and more internal energy, and then the full moon itself is extremely
Right.
extroverted,
Right.
right?
I mean, all of these, if you think about that, and then the Jupiter goes back to Mercury. So there's a conversation in all of this that is really probably the action that Uranus is asking of us is probably a conversation.
Yeah, yeah, it really, yeah, because fire and air, they're they're neither of them are tangible things, and you think about them, and fire something that's kind of magical, mystical, dancing light, and air is wind moving around, and so neither of them are things that you're grabbing. The only thing you're grabbing onto here is the Uranus and Taurus. That's where
Ah,
it's sort of like, that's the physical or tangible piece, and that's where the wake up is coming from, that Uranus represents. But the rest of it is like how you engage, like have the conversation, share your feelings. I get a big share your feelings from that with that Saturn
yeah.
Mars thing. Mars is retrograde, so it's those deep inward feelings that you might
Mm.
be nervous to share or feel a bit vulnerable around. But in the trine, it's just like you can't help yourself. Like go for it.
Right,
So
right. And Uranus is insisting that you do so. So there you have it. Share your feelings, say what needs to be said, even if it brings up anxiety. On the other side of that anxiety can be a lot of excitement. Um, Anything else as far as aspects, or the other thing I was thinking about is just thinking about the path that the moon has traveled in the last 2 weeks.
yeah, I like that
So,
conversation. Mhm.
we don't always talk about this, but occasionally, we used to, I think, more often. But I like to think about the moon in its travels. The moon only takes 28 days to move all the way through all the phases. So if you think about the moon at its initial conjunction to the sun at the last new moon, and then the moon has continued along from Aquarius, which it joined at the new moon was, you already talked about this, January. No, when was it?
Yeah, no, January 29th. You got it.
January 29th. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So on January 29th, we had the new moon. And then from there, the moon traveled. It did not encounter Mercury because Mercury hadn't gotten where it is in this picture yet. But it traveled through and it picked up the energy. I think of the moon as it goes as picking up the energy of that planet as it passes it. So it picked up the energy of Saturn, of Neptune, of Venus, of Chiron, of Uranus, of Jupiter. And finally, the last planet that it picked up was Mars before it came into this opposition. So that really shows us that the moon is not only full, but it's full. It's like it's got all the energy of all these other planets within it as it's having this direct, open conversation with the sun. The only planet that it didn't pick up was Mercury and Pluto.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
one of the things that I think we talked about, Jenny, earlier is how the most recent planet it went over was Mars. And
Mhm.
yes, Mars is retrograde and it's in Cancer. But what do you think it's brought with it from all of these planets to this conversation?
Well, I like how you brought this in, because when you think about it that way, you think about Mars as being the final conversation. That's like being at a party and your last conversation before you leave is with the most energetic, lively person in the room. So that's what's happened here. The moon has, sat with Mars and it's gotten really energized. I mean, even though, like you said, it's in Cancer and it's retrograde, it still carries this like, hey, I want to do something about this now. So it really adds a immediate layer to this, which I do want to add one other thing to that. And Venus is in Aries, and Venus is connected to Pluto here. So Venus is very empowered. It's saying, hey, this is how you find power through these individual relationships. So it
Ah,
really kind of adds a tiny little, just to add that final layer. But that's what I think, and I love that you brought the
yeah,
conversation in. I remember you teaching me that, and like how cool that is to think about the moon absorbing all of the stuff from all these other planets. So
yeah,
that's cool.
and you know, you can look at your own chart in that perspective as well.
Mhm.
As the planets, not just the moon, but as the planets move over other planets, they engage in a conversation and then move on. There's so many ways that you can work with what's actually happening, the movement of the planets and how they are interacting with each other. If you think about the planets as these characters that are having conversations. At any rate, that's uh,
Yes.
that's a
Right.
lot of information we just threw at you.
Fun though.
I think so. I can definitely geek out
Yeah.
to it. Okay. are we ready to move on to the individual impacts?
Let's do it.
Okay, so we're going to start, as we always do, with Aries rising. So if you've got Aries rising in your natal chart, this full moon is happening in your fifth house. And the fifth house is really, it's where we give of ourselves most creatively. You can think of that fifth house as your creativity, as the area where you give love. The old time astrologers called it the house of children, love affairs, and creativity. All of these things are where we give of ourselves. And those of you with Aries rising, this is an area where you really shine. You really shine in this area. This is a beautiful combination for this full moon. And it just makes me think as I look at the sun in the 11th house and the moon in the fifth house, I think immediately of that story Jenny talked about the skiers, because really, this full moon is in the middle of Aquarius season. Over the course of the last few weeks, there's been a lot of focus on really cultivating objectivity in your community, in um, the area of where you meet with like-minded others. So there's been a lot of cultivating objectivity there. And yet, at this moment of this full moon, you are bringing the warmth of your own creativity, the warmth of your own love to the community. So that's a beautiful period of time here. This is a wonderful full moon. And then we bring in what Uranus is asking for. Here's Uranus in your second house. There may be, as you are bringing the warmth of your own heart to this community, there may be some anxiety for you around your own self-worth. Do you have what it takes to give of yourself in this way? Will your community accept it or, love you back or whatever the questions are? But there's some anxiety possibly coming from that area of self-worth. Or it could be anxiety around money or resources. Are you wearing the right outfit to show up in this community? Whatever that is, you want to think about really bringing a conversation about that. You're really being asked to take action in some way around that anxiety and shifting it into an element of excitement. Hmm. So think about how you're going to do that. How are you going to take your anxiety about what you have to offer and find a way to be excited about what you have to offer?
Nice. Yeah, I think the thing to remember when we're always making these videos is that this one is the full moon. So this is just this moment in time of how to kind of conduct yourself in this moment of time. And Lori has covered everything beautifully in this one. I will just simply add the idea that the sun and the moon have this kind of pathway with Uranus, where Uranus is placing this pressure and this stirring up of, just as Lori's mentioned, your finances, your resources, or your something about your values, and there's a lot of things that could be, given given all the things going on in the world right now. And this moment in time is representing, well, what do you do with that anxiety? How do you
Mm.
bring it to your community? How do you share, with other people? How do you bring your the love that you want to share and bring it into that warm moment. So it's so not it's not so much like dumping your anxiety into people, but really reckoning with it and then using that as a way to draw community around you and make those personal connections. And the last thing I'll just say is, as an Aries rising person, like, you are pretty dynamic. Like, you walk into the room and you're Aries, like you have that fire that follows you. So you really have the ability to light up the room. And don't forget that, whatever it is that you're thinking about it for this time in your life. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Lovely. Lovely. Okay, let's move on then to folks who have Taurus rising.
All right, so if you have Taurus rising, the Leo full moon falls in your fourth house. So that's bringing this warm, lovely, gregarious energy into your family life or your home. The fourth house can also be further back, like your lineage through the generations. So it can also refer to older parts of your family, not just the one you have right now. So anyway, all of that is what is being illuminated during this Leo full moon. So really bringing that warm, friendly, bright spot into the home life. Meanwhile, we are in Aquarius season. So the focus during these past couple weeks and for the next couple weeks as well has been very much on your profession or your social reputation, wherever it is that you show up the most in public, or how you show up in public is what the 10th house represents. So that is really what has the attention. There's a call to maybe broaden out into community through your professional or public connections. That's the essence of the Aquarius season. And then this Leo full moon really brings in that warm friendliness. Even if you're building connections at work, it's like you're bringing in that almost like these are your family member type of energy to those connections. So that's another way to look at it. So that's kind of the picture of the full moon. Meanwhile, we did include Uranus on these. Uranus in this case is really just showing us a spot of wake up, a change, a stirring up that maybe has created anxiety or creates a lot of excitement, as Laurie mentioned a lot in the beginning. And that is happening in your first house. So that really has shifted your identity for a while now. But right now, at this moment, that shift in your identity is what is pushing you to express yourself in a new way at work and in the home life. So it's really about responding to that angst that you feel and just taking advantage of this Leo full moon to bring it with you, to bring it into the light, to share it with these other people around you as part of your community building efforts. So, yeah.
That's lovely. I just was thinking about the family, bringing a family member to your outward expression in some way. Just in terms of this being just a moment in time. Maybe there's a way that all of a sudden your mother ends up with you at your job, or some way in which a family member shows up in your more public way, and you may be feeling some anxiety about that. Just a silly little way I was thinking about that.
Mm.
It's interesting. It is just a moment in time, but how we respond to these moments in time, that's the point. How we allow the way in which our understanding of ourself, if you've got Taurus rising, your understanding of yourself has changed so much. And it's really how you respond from that place of what have I woken up to about myself, and how can I bring this, yeah, how can I bring this moment into something that's really worthwhile? It's
Yeah,
interesting.
I
Okay.
know. And just like thinking about a Taurus rising person, they're
Mm,
all about their roots and wanting to keep things the same. And you've been stirred up a lot. So this might not be very comfortable, but ultimately you're just learning how to reset your roots.
yeah.
Just want to add
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Taurus rising, people have been through a lot in these last few years. A
Yeah.
lot of real change to their personalities and how they show up in the world. It's fascinating. Okay, so we're going to move on to folks with Gemini rising. If you have Gemini rising, this Leo full moon is happening in your third house. The third house is, I think of it as, it's your immediate environment and it's how you use your voice. It can involve the people in your life that kind of hold that space of immediate environment, sort of the people that you don't necessarily choose, but there they are. They're part of your environment, like it or not. Your siblings, your neighbors, your um, cousins, whatever, the immediate environment. The third house, yeah, it's how you use your voice. Why two things are together is because you learn how to use your voice sitting on the floor with your siblings. So this is an area where you have a lot of natural warmth. You are able to express yourself probably through your voice with a lot of authentic authentic expression. So here we are, we're in the middle of Aquarius season. So the focus over these last few weeks has been on your worldview, that area that really talks about our wider understanding of the world, the understanding that comes through our education, through travel, through learning. So over these last few weeks, you've really been in a state of kind of trying to hold steady objectively, probably in some way in that area. And right now, you want to really think about how you're using your voice to express from a place of warmth, to express that objective, bigger picture that you understand. We've also included Uranus here. Uranus has been going through your 12th house for quite a while. The reason we're including it is because it's highly activated at the moment of this full moon. There's some way in which your deep, behind the scenes understanding of yourself is asking for some sort of attention. It's asking that you kind of lean in to using your voice from the place of what has awakened in your unconscious. That might be a little too out there to make sense of. Can you clarify something there, Jenny?
No, it's good. I know it's always tricky talking about that 12th house. I don't care how you slice it. Um, but I was thinking something like the where Aquarius is for Gemini rising people, there's this real need to lean into the wisdom of non-attachment right now. And I don't mean, detachment where you're cutting yourself free and not dealing with it. I mean non-attachment where you're choosing to wisely decide what experiences you're going to have and which ones you're not going to take on board. And I can't help but think about, like, this is a time to think about how much media are you willing to consume. So something like that. So I see that as the Aquarius season focus, and then the Leo warmth of, like, okay, well, which things are we going to talk about? Let's try to connect over
I like.
positive things. And then you bring in that Uranus, and it's like, well, what Uranus has been doing is stirring up something to do with your, probably, your health, physical or mental health. Now, may not be that you're ill, but you may be having to deal with something old, something that's part of your psychic makeup that is being uncomfortable. I can't imagine having Uranus in that 12th house. It's got to be stirring up some stuff, right? And at different points, depending what other planets you may or may not have there. But that's what this moment of time is being willing to share whatever that discomfort is, being willing to share a little bit more of your story, and then bringing it into that universal consciousness in the ninth house, that universal way of thinking, maybe not consciousness, but philosophy,
Mm.
being willing to share that story as a way of sharing wisdom with other people. I don't know, something like that. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And for someone with Gemini rising, this might make very clear sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, ask yourself some questions if you've got Gemini rising, really, being aware of what has been awakened over the last several years in your unconscious and how that awakening is tied into this moment of how you use your voice and how you are objectively understanding the bigger picture of the world you find yourself in. Hmm.
Yeah, Gemini people just want to exchange information. So that's part of that story too. You're an information exchanger, so that this can be ever more poignant for you because of that piece as well.
Mhm. Absolutely. Okay. All right. Let's move on to folks with Cancer rising.
Oh, yes. Okay. Those of you with Cancer rising, this Leo moon is landing in your second house. The second house is one of the more challenging houses to work with. And the reason for that is it constitutes somewhat of a blind spot,
Hmm.
that has to do with your resources, the way you value yourself, your relationship to money. These are things that are these aren't the easiest issues, and you only have to think about money to be like, oh yeah, money can bring up all kinds of different stuff. So that's where the Leo full moon is falling. Now, because it's a nice, warm, friendly moon, it really is suggesting like, how can you befriend either this part of yourself more, or maybe your relationship to, your money or your resources? Like, how can you be a little more warm towards that part? Because it's really asking that you illuminate, I would think, the positives of this being a Leo full moon. So that's kind of the where the moon is falling. We are in Aquarius season. The sun is over there in the eighth house in Aquarius. So that means that a lot of your attention right now is taken up with being objective about other people's stuff. So being objective about other people's way of handling money, other people's emotionally raw issues, other people's things that they are probably not even conscious of in some cases. So you're having to deal with that end of things. But fortunately, with Aquarius here, using objectivity is so helpful. It really just helps you handle that, see into other people's things, like give a little space around it, not get so worked up about it. That's very helpful.
Mhm.
So at this full moon, you're being asked to really work with those issues of your resources and your values and how they match up with other people's, and what's the dance that's going on there in your life. So ask yourself that. Meanwhile, we have included Uranus here because Uranus is it's like a big old wooden spoon in a giant cauldron where it's stirring stuff up, and it's just stirring stuff up for you about your community. Now, this has been a years long process, but what's the focus point right now is what is being asked of you from your community. That's really a pressure that it's putting on you. What is being asked? What do you need to think of? What do you have of value that you can offer that impacts not only yourself because you're offering it, but other people who are trying to struggle with the same issues? So that's kind of how I read this. I think Lori had a really good idea about that. Yeah, like that is the question. What is the pressure that's being put on you by community so that you can share something of great value at this Leo full moon? So yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I I think you said everything that needed to be said. I somehow got stuck in my mind on some way in which allowing yourself to profit from community. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the second and the eighth house, yeah, it's about money, it's about resources, it's about self-worth. What are you worth to your community? And how are you able to set aside the anxiety to be able to accept that? One of the things with the 11th house and the community that the 11th house suggests is this is the community that supports you. How can you allow yourself to be supported by community? Is there an anxiety about your community supporting you? So
Mm-hmm.
I think those would be some questions I would ask as well.
That's good. Yeah, I like that because, there is a money question here, right? I mean, you can't
Yeah,
escape that. The second house always in ancient way of thinking is always about money. It's, more in modern times have added more psychological layers to that because there's always psychological layers. But I think that's part of it. And being a Cancer rising person also brings in the layer of, well, there's an emotional component to all of this for you, and there's an emotional connection. And that might be, something, this is beyond the scope of this video, but something worth looking at because Mars is there too. But anyway, like that is what it brings in. I just want to add, when you're thinking about the rising sign, what does that add? And that's
right.
what it adds in this case. So,
Yeah.
all right, cool. Well, I got some homework to do, so I gotta go. So,
I like
yeah.
that. I think that's really interesting. Okay, so now we're going to move on to folks who have Leo rising. Now, if you've got Leo rising, this Leo full moon is very, very personal to you. It is in your first house, which is the most personal house. It's about you, it's about your personality. People with Leo rising kind of just step into the room with a lot of warmth and a lot of brightness. And that's what this moment of this full moon really allows you to shine in a very authentic way. Here we are in the middle of Aquarius season. A lot of your attention for the past few weeks has been really on that area of partnership. There's been a lot of ways that maybe you've been, thinking about partnership or engaged in really understanding your own, yeah, just really developing objectivity in terms of a partner, which can be
Mm,
a little tricky, I think, for people with Leo rising. It's
yeah.
always kind of interesting that polarity between Leo and Aquarius in such a personal area of who you are and who your partner is. So there's a way that you've probably been working in an objective way with a partner. But at this moment, you're like, well, wait a minute. It's about me right now. I think this is a real moment of, this is about me and about my need to have my relationship shine on me. There's something, um, selfishness isn't always a problem. Sometimes it's a necessity. And after several weeks of focusing on the relationship, maybe you need some serious me time. At any rate, we've also included Uranus here because it is in a very tight square to this opposition. So Uranus is in some way asking something of us or presenting a question for us to think about. And in your case with Leo rising, it's coming from the area of your where you are in the most public eye. It can be your career, your vocation, your social reputation. That area of your life for several years now, some years now, has been in a state of a lot of change. There's probably been anxiety, excitement, a combination of those things. But right at this moment of this full moon, it's asking you, how has, there's something about how the changes in this area of your life are impacting your relationship.
Mm,
And you really want to look at that. If you find yourself in the middle of this full moon, really having a lot of anxiety, and issues that are directed to a personal relationship, whether that be a romantic relationship or a business partnership, there's some way that, you're really looking at the changes in the outer world, in you in the outer world, and how that is impacting your relationship.
yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say this is the funny thing about the first, the seventh, and the 10th house is it's kind of a no-brainer. It's a real statement of how your work life puts pressure on your relationship. You and your relationship. I mean, that's essentially what it's saying. And there's always a dynamic interplay between those things just by very nature of astrology showing the first, the seventh, and the 10th in sort of the square connection with each other. So there's, that's sort of no brainer. But this moment in time is really brings in the question of like, okay, well, how do you want to handle it? And just like Lori was saying, like there's been this focus during Aquarius season of this on the partnership and being very objective and in the partnership. And I think the cautionary tale there is not moving too far into detachment in those relationships. And if you are feeling detached, then the answer is to think about how do you shine and express that warm Leo light outwards. Like so, and when you shine it outwards, it's shining inside of you and then out to other people. So by definition, it's allowing you to bring warmth back into the relationship. And that's the funny thing about the first and the seventh. It really is the mirror of relationships for you. And sometimes the whole thing means you and how you behave in relationships. And sometimes it really does mean you and whoever else is over there. Sometimes astrology can be so literal and sometimes it's more symbolic. So think about where you fit into that. And no matter what, lighting that Leo light is the thing that benefits everybody, as long as it's not closed off and self-gratifying, right? I mean, it's as long as it's open, it's doing its job just by sheer virtue of the fact you're a Leo rising person. So, that's the thing. And I'm not talking about being in your ego, just to be clear. But anyway, that's kind of what I was thinking about.
It's interesting. I could keep rattling, but let's move
Yeah,
on.
let's not rattle.
Let's move on to those with Virgo rising.
All right, if you have Virgo rising, you have Leo in your 12th house. That means you have this big, bright, shiny energy tucked just out of view, but just because it's tucked a little bit out of view, it doesn't mean it isn't very boldly and beautifully there. So it's in a way it's kind of nice because you can kind of be a little more reserved about how you move about the world, but then you've got this hidden, riches, kind of behind the scenes that you are is undeniably there. So the Leo full moon shines a light on that. It really shines a light on the hidden fires. Like I think about, for some reason I just got this image of like it's like going down into a cavern and shining a light, and all of a sudden there's like jewels in the side of the cave, and everything lights up. So kind of
Ah,
like that as an image. A lot of great jewels in there to be retrieved.
mm,
So that's what the Leo full moon is sparkling off of. And then this is happening during Aquarius season. So during Aquarius season, you have been asked to incorporate objectivity, perhaps a little bit of non-attachment, um, some sort of vision in how you do your daily lifestyle. So this might be if you're dealing with health issues, it's like, what are you learning from that? If you're, what are you learning from the way that you eat and sleep and all of those things? I mean, it's no matter what, it's helpful to have some objectivity here. And Aquarius season really brings that in during this time. So that's the dynamic, the polarity. You're looking at your lifestyle of the sixth house, and then you're shining light on. But what are those? What's that real power that you have to light people up that's hidden away a little bit? And that's what's going to be activated. We've
mm,
also included Uranus here because Uranus is serving as a source of awakening that's putting pressure on this full moon. So it's bringing more layers to the story, for you. And so the more layers to the story is, what is being stirred up that affects your worldview? What have you needed to awaken to? Like, what critical thinking have you needed to engage in order to kind of reach out and, I don't know, handle anxiety or express excitement? There's something about that, and that's really putting pressure on the other piece of this, that Leo full moon. So really saying, you know what, maybe it's time to just take a look at how those big world issues are impacting you, and then don't be afraid to bring it out, to share it, because the Leo full moon is asking you to share somehow, even though it's the 12th house.
mm,
So
mm.
yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Lori? I know somebody with this.
Well, I'm having all kinds of personal
Oh, good. Do tell.
conversation. It all comes through kind of sarcastic and weird. But just thinking about, you know, that Aquarius in the sixth house being the lifestyle, health, how you function on a day-to-day level. Aquarius is such an interesting sign because it it can go into detachment.
Mm,
And I think there may be a way at this moment in time where if you've become too detached in a certain way around how you've been caring for your body, you may have just gotten a little too detached, and it's time to friggin' wake up and allow those jewels in that cave to create a reflection so that you can, just bring some warmth there and bring
mm,
some personal energy there and allow your bigger picture understanding to push you in a direction of taking better care of yourself.
mm. Yeah, I like that you brought that in, because Uranus is in Taurus, so that's the wisdom of the body, and ninth house wisdom, Taurus body. So wisdom of the body, really saying, look, you need to change your lifestyle, and you need to be, and your story can help shed light for other people. That's the 12th house thing, the behind the scenes impact. I mean, the 12th house is hidden, but it's meant to have a collective impact. So it
Right.
is how your story comes in, your grappling with your wisdom, how you're handling those things and changing your lifestyle based on what your body's telling you. And then how do you bring that into the collective and share your story for others as well? is
Yeah.
what Leo is, right? I like
Yeah.
that. Pretty
Yeah.
cool.
It's really interesting just thinking about where Aquarius is finding, well, the whole polarity of Leo and Aquarius, the balance, the
Yeah.
the balance. You can go so off balance into total detachment with Aquarius, and you can go so off balance with the ego in Leo, and finding that balance is crucial. And I guess that's the gift of the Leo full moon is that balance.
Yeah, and if you're a Virgo rising person, one of your gifts to the world is about physical, earth issues. So there's a tangibility and a service piece that gets thrown in here, which I think is pretty
Hmm.
cool. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on and talk about people who have Libra rising. I think I know a few people with Libra rising. Okay, so if you have Libra rising, this Leo full moon falls in your 11th house. The 11th house is the area of the chart where we think of issues of community, who supports us. Yeah, the community, the 11th house community may involve friends, but it's not necessarily friends. It is like-minded people who support you to what you desire, to your goals. So this is an area where you shine. You have Leo in this house. This is a warm area for you. Community is important to you. So this is what is being highlighted at this full moon. For the last few weeks, while we've been in Aquarius season, your attention has been a lot more on the area of Aquarius. Aquarius season, fifth house for you. So there's a lot over these last few weeks. You've been really developing and working on paying attention to how you give of yourself. The fifth house is how we give of ourselves. It's creativity. It's giving of love. So you're really, balancing those two things. If you have gotten a little too focused on the giving of yourself, this full moon is bringing you back into a moment of, okay, you also are here to receive. You are also worthy of receiving. And I think that's a big message of this full moon is the worthiness of the personal. I mean, the objective is all great and good, but we need to balance that with the personal. Now, we've also included Uranus here. So, because Uranus is in a very tight square to the sun and the moon at the time of this full moon. So, for you, Uranus is in your eighth house. It's been going through there for a number of years now. This area of the eighth house is about how we grapple with the deep, profound issues of the people that we're close to in our lives. So, over these last years, you've probably learned a lot and you've probably changed a great deal in regards to how you set boundaries, how you navigate other people's problems, how you take that stuff on. There's some way at this full moon where there's some stress. There may be someone coming at you with something and you're having a struggle to set the boundaries. There's some way that, let's see, you're being asked to make sure your boundaries are clear in such a way that you can not only give of yourself but also receive.
Mm, nice. Yeah, that's good. That's a good question, I think. You know, it brings in to me what are boundaries? And boundaries, they're a dance. They are not a concrete boom that you set and then you walk away. They're organic, and so there's something about the fine tuning of that brings exactly that question you just asked, Lori. Like, how much do you give? How much do you receive? And having Libra rising, I mean, one of your questions is about balance in life. One of your questions is, you know, noticing indecision, and then when you're noticing indecision, what's that about? Well, it's about this key question about giving and receiving. And so I think that it's interesting because I think the Aquarius can also be thought of, the word sisterhood or brotherhood came to me while you were talking, and I was just thinking about that. But for a Libra rising person, that kind of sisterhood or brotherhood, however you want to look at it, is how you involve yourself in creative pursuits. So it's kind of like your personal willingness to take risks, to do the creative stuff, is the thing that brings you into contact with that kind of bigger picture of groups.
Mm.
And then that's the same thing in the 11th house. It's like the Leo in the 11th house is like, okay, so how do you bring that personal piece and let it be seen by
Mm.
society and community so that you can feel supported for whatever
Mm.
those choices are you've made about it. So I like that. It's always funny with Libra rising because it flips, everything
Right.
on its head kind of. So you're always kind of, I mean, it's opposite of Aries. So, but anyway, blah blah blah. I think that's really nice, and I like that. Yeah.
I do too. Okay, let's move on to folks who have Scorpio rising.
Okay, so those of you with Scorpio rising, the Leo full moon really brings a big bright spotlight onto your 10th house of your profession or your public reputation, or your social reputation. The 10th house is the most public house. So it's however you show up in public, whatever that is, whatever you most show up as. So that's what is being highlighted. With the Leo moon here, it's really showing you have this ability to be very warm and friendly in this public way. And that's pretty cool. That can be pretty helpful. I guess as long as you're, really reaching for the bigger picture, you're not doing it just for yourself. You're really understanding that you are radiating light for other people. So that's kind of what the Leo full moon brings. And that is opposite to the sun in Aquarius. We are in Aquarius season. So your focus really has been for the last couple weeks on your fourth house, like your home life, like what's going on in the home life. Have there been issues that you need to get some space from? Do you feel like you're aligning yourself with family members? Are you on the same page? What's the story there? Are you so objective that you're detached from some issues in your family life, or are you exercising a great amount of objectivity that's allowing you to be very present, either as a parent or whoever's in your home life with you. Or fourth house can also be the home, which you can't forget about things like home renovations that can be pretty stressful. So it might need to be getting objective because your house is being worked on. That would be another way this can manifest. Anyway, that's the polarity between the work life and the home life. You're being asked to figure out how to work those together. And part of the question that's being asked of you is coming from where Uranus is in the chart. As Uranus is in your 7th house, and Uranus is very tightly involved in this full moon. So it's putting a lot of pressure on that full moon excess. It's putting pressure on how you conduct yourself at home and what do you need to show up like at work. It's really putting pressure on that. And the pressure is coming from your partnerships. And remember, partnerships, I mean, it could be a spouse at home and there's something going on there that's putting pressure on this, but it also could be a business relationship that is putting some kind of pressure onto how you're showing up in your 10th house, your most public life. So think about that. Think about what are you being asked from one partnership or of another to do. What are you being asked to do about your roots and your home life, and then your really public life that's about social achievement. So that's the question.
Yeah, that's definitely a question. I think there's another one. The way I was thinking of it also, not other than, but also is how have, Uranus has been moving through the 7th house of yours for a number of years now. You have changed your understanding. Your relationships themselves have changed for sure. And some of the stress of these different ways of being in relationship, but how you view yourself as a partner may also be a part of the question. How has your own expectation of yourself as a partner, how is that causing stress on your home and your career or social reputation. So,
Mhm.
it could be twofold. It might be an individual that you're in relationship with. It might be your own understanding of what relationship means to you. But there's some question coming from that that is really asking you in this moment, how are you going to bring your objective understanding of home and family into a state of warmth in your public reputation?
Mhm. Yeah, and you can't miss the fact either, Lori, right? That since it's a Scorpio rising chart, well, we're dealing with the fourth, the seventh, and the 10th house. And you add the first house to that, and we're talking about the four really powerful, potent houses. And as a Scorpio rising person, you are walking around the world with an intense desire to transform things, or a way that you want to bring deep emotions into the conversation. So that's part of this moment in time too, that asking yourself, like, how does that play into your overall role to kind of, I don't know, maybe bring some catalytic energy to everything you touch basically in life. So that's playing a little bit of a role too. So
Interesting. Okay, let's move on to folks who have Sagittarius rising.
hmm.
So if you've got Sagittarius rising, this bright, shiny, friendly Leo moon is showing up in your ninth house. The ninth house is the area of your higher understanding. It's really your worldview. You can think of, all the things that develop your worldview, such as education, travel, religion, politics, all these things that kind of come together to create this overriding worldview that we have. So, with Sagittarius rising, that's where the focus is. Okay. So for the last few weeks, we've been in Aquarius season. We are in Aquarius season here at this full moon. So for this period of time, the last few weeks, you've been really focused on your own voice, your own um, kind of your immediate environment, the people in your immediate environment, siblings, neighbors, what have you. There's some way that has been a point of focus. You tend to be, kind of approach that area with a lot of objectivity. So that's where your attention has been. At the moment of this full moon, your attention is brought into a more public view, into this area of your worldview. So there's some way that you're bringing your voice, your objective voice, in a warm manner into a public view. So, in the midst of this, we included Uranus because it is forming a very tight square to this opposition. And Uranus is in your sixth house. So, you want to think about what Uranus is doing here is it's creating some excitement or some anxiety. It's causing us to, or suggesting that we ought to be looking at what is the the pebble in your shoe there? What is kind of an aggravation at this moment? What's aggravating about bringing this objective voice into this warmth of your worldview? What's the question? What's the issue? So the sixth house is your day-to-day routines, your lifestyle, which has been going through a lot of change over the last a number of years now. There's been a lot of change in that area. So something in how you have changed your routines, um, your your work routines, your health routines, some big change that's happened in that area is creating uh, a moment where you need to ask yourself some questions. How do you turn the anxiety of it into the excitement of it? What is it? How has your lifestyle changes impacting your worldview and how you use your voice?
Yeah, nice.
Mm.
Yeah, I can't help but feel I focus a lot of my practice on wellness. And whenever I look at the sixth house, I'm always, as Lori, you're saying so well, like it's your lifestyle, exactly, all the things. But with Taurus here, there's really an awakening that's coming from your physical body.
Mm,
There also could be an awakening that has come from your connection to nature. Those are both very Taurus things. So having Taurus in your sixth house as a Sagittarius rising person, that's where some of the wake up could be coming from. There's a jolt, a query about, hey, can you realign? Can you get more aligned with what your physical body is asking from you? Can you get more aligned
nice.
with, can you connect with nature more in a way, in a slow, methodical way? Like I'm thinking like walks, like the calmness of walking. So that's where there's a tremendous amount of, um, wait. I mean, I just keep thinking of a wake up. There's a wake up here
Mm,
that's come to you. And at this moment in time of the Leo full moon, because that can be ongoing for a while. But the Leo full moon is saying exactly what Lori just said, which is, hey, okay, what do you want to say about it? What do you need to share about whatever this experience is that you've been having? Now is the moment to share it. And the ninth house is very much part of your self expression, the philosophy that you develop through your experiences. So this is a moment in time of, yeah, really sharing that accumulated wisdom that you've gotten
that's
from
great.
whatever those issues are. So yeah. And Sagittarius rising, you're here to expand people's wisdom, period. That's what you're all about. So this is quite a nice moment for you. So
Yeah, that's lovely. All right, we're going to move on then to folks who have Capricorn rising.
all right, so Capricorn rising, it's always interesting because you've got the Leo is in the eighth house. The eighth house is a mysterious house. It's the house of the occult. It's the house of rituals. It's the house where you have to share resources with other people, which always has these kind of hidden complications that you don't seem to expect, even though it happens over and over. But that's what the eighth house really speaks to. It's sort of the stickiness of intimacy with other people where you just end up bumping into stuff, and there's always things that need to be resolved and worked out. And so here the Leo full moon is really drawing attention to those issues. It's drawing attention to your ability to handle that, to navigate that, to set boundaries in a healthy way that allows you to shine light into this area but doesn't suggest that you're giving up way too much of yourself, or on the other hand, being a bit egotistical here and therefore not seeing the other people in this house, the other people and their issues because of something you're trying to work out. So those are all things that can come up in that eighth house. And the Leo full moon is shining a positive, bright light into this area, letting you see the positive sides of the gift you have here.
Mm.
And meanwhile, we are very much in Aquarius season. We have been for a couple of weeks or a few weeks. And that means that the sun has been in your second house, really shining a light on how you value yourself, your own resources, your own values, your own money, like all of those personal things have been the main topic. But now at this Leo full moon, you're being asked to look at the other end of that. Like, what are the issues other people are having, and how can you? I mean, a polarity is a conversation. So there's a conversation here about your own stuff, your own values, and how that's impacting people that you're connected with or that you encounter. So that's kind of the central part of the polarity. And then we like to include other stuff to make this conversation more fun. And in this case, we have thrown in Uranus because it's in a tight square to this full moon. So it's got something to say. And what it has to say is it's stirring up some anxiety or question about how you give of yourself. I mean, in a nutshell, the fifth house is how you give of yourself. It can be creative pursuits, it can be children that you have in your life, it can be risk taking and recreational things that you like to pour your energy into. So in any case, Uranus has been here for a while, but the moment right now is about asking, what have you been awakening to that concerns how you give of yourself? And that is the very thing that is putting pressure on this Leo full moon and asking you to think carefully about what light you are shining into that eighth house. What boundaries are you setting? Are they the right ones? Are they still warm and friendly but also serving you in some way? So anyway, I'll stop there.
It's an
Lori.
interesting one. I think I keep thinking that this has a lot to do with generosity.
Mm.
You know, with Aquarius in the second house, and for the last few weeks, that being the season we're in, there's a way in which people with Capricorn rising can just be kind of a little bit, just objective, maybe even slightly detached from their own connection to money and resources. And yet, with Leo in the eighth house, that generosity toward others, toward
Mm.
how they manage other people's resources. There's some issue of generosity or coolness, and then with Uranus in that fifth house, how you do give love, which is obviously a form of generosity. So I would encourage you with Capricorn rising just to think about, what generosity means to you.
Mhm.
Yeah, what it means to you to give of yourself. That's all. That's all I want to add.
Yeah, and just, as a Capricorn person, you are concerned with integrity. And so this does bring in that conversation around money and other people's resources too. So, yeah.
Hopefully you're concerned with integrity.
Well, you better be.
You're right.
It's gold, gold.
Capricorn and Scorpio. To me, those are the two that really have to make sure they pay careful attention to their own integrity. So,
Agreed.
anyway,
Okay.
moving on to Aquarius rising. If you've got Aquarius rising, this full moon falls in your seventh house. So it's interesting. The seventh house is very simple. It is your partnerships, whether that be your romantic or your business partners. It's, in a lot of ways, I think of that seventh house as contractual relationships. What is the contract between you and another? So the seventh house can also be, your therapist or your astrologer or, yeah, contractual type relationships, important relationships. Your very best friends. Sometimes you've got, it might not be a written contract, but you've got a contract on those relationships, I think, as well. So that's where the light is shining here. We're in the middle of Aquarius season, so for the last few weeks, the attention has very much been on yourself. And, you tend to, with Aquarius rising, you tend to have a pretty objective view of yourself, and you've kind of been kind of steeping in that personal objectivity. Um, and at this moment of this full moon, your attention is shifted. And you really need to look at taking all that objective understanding of yourself and offering some warmth to your partner. Your partner probably needs some warmth right about now because you've been over on this other side. So, at any rate, that's really the moment of the full moon is bringing your attention to how you shine a light on your partnerships, the generosity you bring to another. Now we've included Uranus here because it's in such a tight square to this opposition. And Uranus is currently passing through your fourth house, where it's been for a number of years now. In this past number of years, there's been a lot of change, a lot of upheaval and rearrangement, probably when it comes to your home, your family, your understanding of your ancestry. Something in that realm has really changed. And at this moment of this full moon, you want to pay attention also to what that change has taught you and what it offers in terms of how to kind of balance that objective focus on yourself and the generosity needed to maintain and support partnership. What are the changes in your understanding of home and family and how they can support that?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I would just add to this one, I think you've covered very well, and that makes sense, just to have this disruption at your roots, kind of pushing into your sense of self and your partnerships. But I just would add that as an Aquarius rising person, it's easy to move around the world and with an objective viewpoint, or at least to be perceived as being extraordinarily objective. But when it comes to your relationships, yeah, not so much. Total opposite. So when it comes to your personal relationships, there's a real involvement, deep personal involvement. And I can see how that can be a source of stress, especially when one is having to navigate some big shifts in their root system.
Mhm.
So it is, it's a quite a statement here, I think, with the Aquarius rising. But anyway, that's all I have to add. So
I love that. Yeah, it's kind of a simple one, isn't it? First, seventh, and fourth houses. It's kind of a
yeah,
simple statement in a way, and a very
pretty common.
profound one because it is those angular houses.
Yeah.
Okay, Pisces
All
rising.
right. Okay, so if you have Pisces rising, this Leo full moon is landing in your sixth house. The sixth house, in a nutshell, is your lifestyle, is the way that you eat, you sleep, you exercise, you meditate. All of those things are the things that make up your day to day fabric of your existence. So that's kind of what the Leo moon is really highlighting, all of those pieces. What are your routines? What are your practices? And really, what are the ones that bring you joy? What are the ones that really, I mean, just because they're routines and they're daily doesn't mean that they shouldn't bring you joy. So really ask yourself that, what are the ones that really bring a sense of joy in this at this moment of the full moon? Focus on that. What are the sources of joy in this part of your life? So in the meantime, we are in Aquarius season. We've been in Aquarius season for a few weeks. So that means that the sun is moving through your 12th house, and really shining a light onto those things that are behind the scenes. So, this is always that tricky house. There's a lot of layers here, but it really refers to the unconscious layers. It might refer to the need to address mental health, mental spiritual health, and having some therapy that's supporting that. It can also mean the way that you may hold a powerful position in society where you're making a lot of changes that are hidden from the public. So those are all things that can happen, that have, the Aquarius sun has been shining light on whatever those topics are for you. So think about that. Just simply, what are those hidden topics? And then at the moment of this Leo full moon, it's really about bringing those big, broad topics into your immediate lifestyle and really connecting with maybe joy that comes from those like spiritual or psychic or unconscious places. So I mean, it's a big topic for a little full moon, but but that's where this is landing. And to add a couple more layers, Lori and I always like to throw something in there to spice it up. And in this case, we have Uranus spicing it up from the third house. That's because Uranus is in a very tight square to this full moon axis, which suggests that it is exerting pressure on this axis. And what it is about the way you use your voice. The
Mhm.
third house is essentially how you navigate your world with your voice, in a nutshell. So that's what there's been probably lots of change in how you do that in the past few years. But the focal point here is to ask yourself what specific thing has caught your eye in your immediate environment that is causing you stress, that is causing you difficulty, that you need to bring attention to in some way that incorporates it into your daily lifestyle. So something along those lines. But what do you have to add to make this a little more clear, Lori? It's Pisces rising.
Well, it is this is a complicated one. Like you said, it's an awful lot for a little a little full moon. But yeah, there's some objective way that you manage your own internal hidden processes. And yet that objectivity is really insisting at this point that you bring generosity to your own daily routines. I think there's something in here about really, yeah, giving yourself a break
Mm,
physically, mentally, giving yourself a break and allowing your conversation with the people in your daily routine life, your siblings, your neighbors, you know, just there's something that needs to be spoken about. And I think it really involves being generous with your own understanding of how you care for yourself.
yeah. Yeah, because sixth house is self care too. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
And
definitely is.
generosity of self-care. People with Pisces rising, I think, Pisces can be so floaty, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but I think it really needs permission sometimes to be generous with the self.
Mm, yeah. Well, I think what you're getting at too is just, Pisces is a sensitive sign. If that's the sign you're walking around the room with and walking around the world with, like, it's a lot of sensitivity there, and there is a real need to de-stress, to take time in silence, to take time out to really drop into flow, imaginative pursuits as part of your lifestyle. I mean, that's gotta be something because you need to restore. I mean, water absorbs, and that means you need to, but it's also very cleansing. So
Yeah.
you need to kind of cleanse and release those absorptions so you can remain present and keep showing up with that sensitivity. Right? Because otherwise you're going to just want to run away and escape, right? Because Pisces will escape.
Right.
So
Right.
I think, yeah, I think that's great, Laura, that you brought in that idea of like, this is a time to take rest, give yourself a break.
Yeah. Yeah. Be generous with yourself. Okay. I think we've covered them all.
We have indeed.
Yay. Okay.
Yay.
So thank you for anyone who's still hanging around listening to us. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you on the next video.
Right. Thanks, Lori. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.